and Design and AIA Miami. Welcome. Glad to see you all. I know we will be having some people come on as the program goes on, but I want to get started on time. Remember to mute your video as well as your audio. It helps us with bandwidth, and we want to make sure that we have a smooth program for you all. So I'm going to, at the very top, I'm going to, oh, by the way, also, as we said in the slide, we will have Q&A at the end. So please just put your questions in the chat to everyone, and we will read them during the Q&A. So it's really important that you keep yourself muted. I'm going to, just for a minute now, I'm going to turn over the program to J.P. Brooker. He's the Florida Conservation Director for the Ocean Conservancy. He's going to tell you about an exciting study program that they are just kicking off. J.P.?
Thank you, Cheryl. As Cheryl said, I'm the Director of Florida Conservation for Ocean Conservancy, and I wanted to highlight through our Shores Forward initiative, we formalized a conservation partnership with the City of Miami late last year. And tomorrow I'm very excited to announce that we'll be formalizing our second Shores Forward partnership with the City of Miami Beach. And it's through these flagship partnerships that Ocean Conservancy is looking to bridge the gap between the built and natural environments, reducing the negative effects of urbanization and improving the co-beneficial consequences of working with nature to protect communities is a significant priority of ours. And as a direct product of our partnership and collaboration with the City of Miami, we are leading the first of its kind marine plastics assessment ever to be conducted in the United States. And this is called the Circularity Assessment Protocol. It's being conducted with Dr. Jenna Jambeck at the University of Georgia, who is a global leader on the circular economy and analysis of the circular economy. And the assessment will be collecting on-the-ground data and assessing management of plastics at the community level in Miami. And it'll show how plastics end up in the Miami River and ultimately Biscayne Bay and the ocean. And so I bring this up, and this is all to say that if we work together and in an all-hands-on-deck manner, including municipalities like the City of Miami, including Miami Beach, nonprofits like Ocean Conservancy, and stakeholders from private industry, we can find pollution solutions that will work for our built and natural environments. So we're thankful for today's conversation, and we're eager to hear the discussion, and thank you very much.
Thanks, JP. That's two really important partnerships. And I'm going to now, I just want to quickly acknowledge that these programs, Urban Redesign, we started during COVID, but we're going to continue these no matter what happens. However, once we can start meeting again, but we partner with different organizations, but our main partner for this is the American Planning Association Gold Coast section. And I just want to shout out to them and thank them for helping us promote these programs. And thank you, JP and the Ocean Conservancy. We are always ready to partner to get the word out. I'm going to turn the program now over to Jason Hagopian, AIA with Sal Design Group. Jason is the president of the MCAD board, and take it away, Jason.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, everybody. It's great to see some of you, but I know you're all there in the background. So I just want to welcome you all to our Urban Redesign program, Miami Waterways Pollution Solution ? Thank you, JP, for highlighting the title of our event in your introduction, actually. So, you know, the Miami Center for Architecture and Design is the place for everyone interested in design in the built environment, with community meeting space and educational programs to enhance public appreciation for architecture and design. MCAD is the home to AIA Miami, as well as the Downtown Miami Welcome Center in partnership with the Miami Downtown Development Authority. Right now, our space is, due to COVID, we're we're not officially open for business, but we are there and we have a virtual exhibit going on. I won't highlight all of the amazing things that are coming up the rest of this month and December and January, both with Miami Center for Architecture and Design and the AIA, but I'm going to encourage you to go to both of the websites. It's aiamiami.org or miamicad.org, and you can see all of the amazing things that are going on, events and programs available to everybody. I will highlight one very important thing I need everybody to do and to spread the word about. It's Give Miami Day. That is this week on November 19th. This is an amazing opportunity to donate to your favorite not-for-profit organizations. And of course, the Miami Center for Architecture and Design is one of those. So I would encourage you, if you care about architecture and the built environment, please go to the Give Miami Day website. And particularly if you go and you donate to MCAD at 7 o'clock on the 19th, an extra bonus amount of money will go to our organization. So please, 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 please go to the website, Give Miami Day, and contribute to MCAD. So I'm 1 minute over the agenda. So before I get too far behind schedule, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Katrina Fumagalli, who is Vice President of the Miami Center for Architecture and Design. She is an architect and a design manager with Stantec, and it is with her effort that we are having today's incredible panel discussion. So Katrina, to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. We're really excited for this event. Well, we wanted to have a chance to have this discussion with experts from City of Miami and City of Miami Beach to discuss recent ongoing water pollution issues and what the solutions are. With that said, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel. And if the panel can wave so everyone can see you, that'd be great. First, we have Elizabeth Wheaton. She goes by Betsy. She is the director for the City of Miami Beach Environment and Sustainability Department. We have Alan Dodd. He's the Chief Resilience Officer and Director of City of Miami Department of Resilience and Public Works. We have Nelson Perez-Jacome. He's the City Engineer for City of Miami Beach. And we have Lisa Spadafina. She is the Chief for the Natural Resources Division for DERM. And with that being said, I'll start off with question number one. I'll start with Betsy, but it's for all the panelists. What would you like the program's participants to know about you? Maybe just one quick fact.
I've been working for the City of Miami Beach for going on 13 years. I'm passionate about the environment and love being a part of this conversation because I think that it's going to take both science, engineering, and design to make the city of the future.
How about Nelson?
I've been working with water treatment systems in Miami Beach for at least 12 years. 2 of the last have been in the public sector. So I'm excited that we're improving these water treatment systems and finding hybrid solutions that convey the stormwater and improve the water quality going into Biscayne Bay.
Thank you. Lisa?
I often end up on not muting myself, and then nobody can hear what I'm saying. So I'm going to be very diligent about that. So I've been working with DERM, and for those of you that don't know who DERM is, we are part of Miami-Dade County in the Regulatory and Economic Resources Department, and we oversee all the environmental regulation at a county level. And so it's hard for me to squeak out the words that I've been working at DERM for more than 20 years now. And I feel like I have a pretty good handle on most of the things occurring in our natural environment and have a background in marine biology, which has expanded with my experience at DERM to include all things regulatory on the coastal areas. And of course, I work with Betsy and Alan and Nelson all the time on trying to make things better for Biscayne Bay and for our adjacent watersheds, in basically, you know, everything from science, engineering, design, and innovative ideas. So I think you have the right people here on the panel to sort of talk about these things. So I'm pretty excited to be part of that.
Great. Thank you. How about Alan?
It's great to be invited to be part of this panel. My path getting here is a little different than most folks. I spent a lot of time in the U.S. Army and ended up working with the Army Corps of Engineers in Jacksonville on the Everglades Restoration Project, which really showed to me the impacts of the built environment on what used to be natural Florida. And I think a lot of the lessons learned from that program can also be applied as we're trying to modify and adapt our stormwater systems and the urban environment to be a little bit more environmentally friendly. And I'd say probably the key piece on it is what I learned in that program is that you can't expect government alone to do it. It really does take a lot of non-governmental organizations and a lot of very passionate people to get involved with these issues if you want to make a difference. And that's why it's so great that you have so many people who are tuned into this discussion today.
Okay, did we get everybody there? Okay, so let's get right into it. Alan, I'd like to direct this question to you. The city of Miami has recently passed a new anti-pollution program. What are the benefits of this program and what measures are being taken to protect the city's natural resources?
Okay, well, we've passed a couple things over the past 2 years, but I think the one you may be referring to is dealing with illegal discharges or illicit discharges through the stormwater system. We have had a tremendous problem this past year with discharges of dirt and sediment coming through the stormwater system from our active construction sites, which is creating huge plumes impacting the bay. Typically when these happen, we would go out from a regulatory point of view under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System and issue a notice of violation and give a contractor a $500 fine, which didn't really have a whole lot of impact. It wasn't getting their attention. The commission gave us the authority to bring the building department in, and when we have a discharge reported to us, we now have a building inspector who will come down and issue a stop work order. They will shut the contractor down from doing any work until they stop whatever is causing the discharge from happening, and they clean out the stormwater system to prevent any of that sediment or debris that's in the pipes already from going to the bay. We've had 2 incidences already where we have had to use this new authority, and it has been very effective in getting contractors to improve the quality of the protection that they're providing for the bay and keeping their sites cleaner.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, next question. I'm going to direct this to Nelson. Similar to the last question that Jason asked, is there any program that the city of Miami Beach has implemented?
Sorry, I was on mute. Absolutely, and I'll touch base on the engineering programs, and Betsy might want to speak a little bit about the environmental side of things. But in terms of the stormwater program, Miami Beach is currently implementing what we're calling water treatment systems, which essentially are complex systems that not only convey the water and dispose of the water, but also treat the water prior to its disposal. So while traditionally Miami Beach outfalled via gravity or possibly via sheet flow to the bay and the water was never treated properly, now we've implemented water treatment systems that have bar screens, have pollution control structures, have floatable separation at the wet well, have aeration at the wet well, and on top of that have injection wells, or we're working with Durham to implement these injection wells and these new versions of water treatment systems prior to disposing any water to the bay. So Betsy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, you know, In Miami Beach, the way that we look at stormwater management, environmental protection is from an integrated approach. So it's not just our public works team and our environmental team who are thinking about the health of the bay, but we're bringing in our building department, bringing in code compliance as we're thinking about design, during design, and then also construction. We have inspectors that are trained to look for environmental violations and quickly respond as we're getting complaints from the public. We also work from a design perspective with CIP and Public Works to make sure that public projects are designed in a way to prevent that pollution. And then also we review all construction projects from public property. We review those plans to make sure that they have sediment and erosion controls in place and as part of their overall building permit. And if these sites are found not to have these controls in place, we will issue a violation, and if needed, have a stop work order as well.
One of the things I also wanted to mention, Katrina, was one of the programs that we recently adopted was the Green Infrastructure Program to add another level of treatment prior to the water even entering the system. So that way there's proper water quality treatment in the swales from native species that uptake nutrients. Because we've done studies, and what we've found is that nutrients are really the big concern for the bay. That's when we're talking about killing the bay, we're essentially what we're saying is that there's not enough dissolved oxygen for the aquatic life. So by these nutrients coming into the bay causing algal blooms, and the algal blooms taking up all the DO, it becomes a real problem for the aquatic life. So we're trying to capture these nutrients and sequester them ahead of them even entering our stormwater systems.
Thank you. That makes sense. I didn't know that. And what we can get in later of what we can do to help you guys out.
Sure.
So Lisa, and then maybe Nelson, maybe you already answered some of this, but from the county standpoint and from Durham, what engineering tactics and water quality monitoring methods are being used to keep the waterways clean?
So Durham's in sort of a unique role when it comes to playing a role here in water quality and thinking about what the impacts might be and engineering solutions and monitoring to see sort of what's happening. And our role sometimes is largely regulatory. And so all of the things that you're hearing from the city of Miami and Miami Beach sort of come to us as some of their suggested solutions and some of their designs to combat these issues. And I think what becomes difficult is in our urban areas where the development has already occurred and we have old infrastructure and there's there are upgrades, as Nelson said, to stormwater systems. You have to think about how we're going to design these new systems to account for the sort of sins of the past, if you want to call it that. So what Nelson mentioned is that there was largely no pre-treatment that was happening before stormwater was conveyed to the bay. And so, and that's not unique to Miami. That's pretty much how the world has worked over time. And some areas are more sensitive to these runoff issues than others. And here in Miami-Dade County, obviously we have, this jewel of Biscayne Bay that for, many years has been able to sustain what's been happening on the landscape. Because when you think about what our pollution problems are, they really all stem from the landscape at some point, and then they're entering into our water bodies through either conveyance canals, direct runoff, through these stormwater systems. And so when we're looking at a new design or a design, we do largely rely on all of you who are on this meeting as design professionals to think about how you will achieve these objectives of making sure that there is adequate pretreatment. And yeah, I know there are standards, and so from an engineering perspective, you're trying to follow these standards. But I think what, as of late, and working with Nelson very closely, my water control staff probably meet with him weekly at this point to sort of discuss these things. And as far as innovation goes, I would say that Miami Beach has been out there in front of most people trying to think about how do you prevent flooding and nutrient runoff in a largely urbanized area with hardly any green space to allow for this pre-treatment to occur naturally, which they don't have the space, particularly in the southern part of the city, where it really is very built out. And so we've been working on thinking about some of these combination systems where you might use these injection wells, which are somewhat unique to the barrier island because you can't use injection wells in other parts of the county where you could have potential salt intrusion moving around once you start to inject water into the ground. But the city is uniquely placed in that way that they don't have that as an issue necessarily. But it is an issue in other parts of the county, so we have to think about that. But trying to reduce the pollution into the bay at whatever entry point, I think is really the goal at this point. And thinking about that in an innovative way, and maybe ways that we haven't thought about it before, maybe thinking about changing what the standards are, even from a state level, because I think everyone uses the state criteria to sort of identify, and for those of you in the know, pre-treatment right now into Biscayne Bay as an aquatic reserve is you have to remove the first 1.5 inches of stormwater, which is the dirtiest, and dispose of that somewhere or treat it somewhere before it can hit the surface water, which is the bay. And so, you know, we're in a different time now. There's king tides, there's sea level rise, there are these challenges that didn't exist before. And I think, like I said, City of Miami Beach is sort of unique in that way, and maybe some of the other coastal cities, in that traditional systems just they're not working anymore. The gravity systems aren't working. And even if you were, I think the city has probably within the last 15 years, they have utilized forward pumping on some of their systems in a different way than they most recently have. And those went to injection wells, but injection wells are difficult to maintain. They take up a lot of space because of the capacity. They're not always the fix. And so working with the municipalities is the way for us to go forward. And of course, with all the design professionals on thinking about new ways in which to achieve these goals, which is to take the nutrient-laden stormwater runoff and take that out of the equation, because I think that's really the thing that we have to do at this point.
Thank you, Lisa. Nelson, do you have anything to add? Maybe like one very kind of specific creative engineering tactic that the beach is doing?
Well, what I would like to add, because I think I hit on the engineering tactics from a broad perspective, is that Lisa brought up the interesting fact that because of what we're seeing with rising tides, with climate change, the traditional methods may not be working. So we have to get creative in the tactics that I mentioned in terms of hybrid solutions. And what I will say is that from a flooding perspective, our program is working, most definitely. And we have pictures of higher tides in the same location to prove that. And from a nutrient loading perspective, we don't want to shed any nutrients to the bay, most definitely, right? But we did do a study, and what we found is that it really is a regional problem. Miami Beach and really any municipality near the bay is a minor contributor compared to the overall region, and for that matter, even atmospheric deposition into the bay. There's a wet factor and a dry factor to atmospheric deposition. When it rains, nitrogen and phosphorus fall on the bay. The dust floating around in the atmosphere falls on the bay, and that in itself, I can't speak for the other cities, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was similar. But for Miami Beach, Miami Beach is less than half of that atmospheric contribution. We're talking about 0.5% for nitrogen, 2.8% for phosphorus, and atmospheric deposition is upwards of 7%, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a regional factor, is what I'm trying to elaborate. It takes everyone to come together as one.
Thank you, Nelson.
Okay, next question. I know Nelson recently kind of brought up the nutrients and dust and particles, but I'll direct this to Betsy first. What chemicals do you keep seeing in the water, and which are the most harmful? And what can we do to prevent them from entering our waterways?
Sure. So to build off of, what Nelson said, and as well as Lisa, it's nutrients that are the pollutants of concern. So as we're thinking about pollution prevention, it's how do we prevent these nutrients from entering the system through our stormwater? And that's going to be everything from education, educating the public about picking up after their dogs, making sure that any home chemicals that they may use on their lawns, that they reduce those. We have a fertilizer ordinance, which did pass on first reading in September, and we will be bringing back in the next few months, that will limit the use of fertilizers during the rainiest seasons. We will be building off of actually Miami-Dade County's ordinance, because again, this is a regional concern. So we want to make sure that we're coming at this from this regional approach. So it's limiting these nutrients, and that would be nitrogen, phosphorus that do come from those fertilizers, as well as grass clippings and other vegetation that comes down from the trees when we have these major rain events, and ends up in our stormwater system. So through education, through policy to help reduce those nutrient loads, those are ways that, things that the city can do. And it's the consistent monitoring. So we've added 35 water quality monitoring stations to enhance the county's program and provide a more in-depth analysis of what pollutants of concern are here in Miami Beach. And what we found is consistent with what we're seeing throughout the county is it is those nutrients, the phosphorus, that we really need to be reducing and limiting. And as we think about pollution prevention, we're also looking at activities that are going to have the biggest bang for our buck. So how as a city can we design, how can we do education and tailor education so that the dollars that we're spending in this realm are going to have the biggest impact on the Bay?
That's true. Alan, Lisa, or Nelson, do you have anything to add?
I think Lisa can talk probably more about nutrient loading and the stuff going to the bay than anybody on here. But the one other thing, in addition to what Betsy talked about, is we also banned use of glyphosate products on any city operations. And to be honest with you, a lot of times we really don't need the amount that people are using on it. They like using P for plenty. And so at least on the city side, we've eliminated that. And I think that also will help to improve the quality of the bay. Anything that you put on the sidewalks, you put on the street, cleaning off in the swales, eventually it's going to get in the bay. So it's better to not use them at all.
I mean, I think I have a more, if you want to call it a global perspective of how Miami-Dade County is doing in general in terms of water quality. As Betsy mentioned, we have a pretty robust water quality program that's been in existence since the late 70s. And we have over 100 stations throughout the Bay, including our freshwater canals coming into the Bay, but on the downstream side of any of the salinity control structures. And then of course we have some additional sampling that we do. And so the monitoring that we're doing has been more of an ambient program. We also have a groundwater ambient program in which we're looking at and trying to determine where these sources of pollution might be coming from, to see what it's doing over time. And so because you can't find some discrete things with a program like that, we have over the last 5 or 10 years been designing these other sort of, if you want to call them ad hoc, specific studies where we're going out and taking water quality samples and trying to trace these things back to our sources. And what we found is that really there's no silver bullet here. And what you're hearing from the other folks on the panel is there are all of these multiple things that have to be done. Fertilizer ordinances. I don't think we talked about other infrastructure upgrades like wastewater. When you think about it, some of the city of Miami and Miami Beach are some of the oldest infrastructure in the county. And so, it's expensive to replace these things. And over time, you think that you're going to catch up with it, but, it does take a long time to do these capital improvements. So that's another thing that we're thinking about at a county level in terms of leaky infrastructure, talking about septic tanks, which I know the city of Miami Beach doesn't have any. I think the city of Miami may have some, but in a limited capacity. And so all of these things contribute. Grass clippings, like Betsy mentioned, and Alan talked about, using pesticides and herbicides, which I think in terms of managing our parks, that's a pretty standard operation. And so I do remember a funny anecdotal story of somebody that used to work at the city of Miami Beach when they were first discussing how do we put a fertilizer ordinance in place, how do we get people to want to buy into this. And my suggestion at the time, this was years ago, was start with the city. Have the city start, changing the way that they apply fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides to city property. And then you have a leg to stand on to say, hey guys, we're doing it at the city level. We're all part of this community. We all sort of need to do this together. And I think from the perspective of seeing what's out there, I think Betsy kind of nailed it in terms of the nitrogen and phosphorus. Those are the things that you can't see in the water, and they don't always lead to algal blooms, but you can get to a point where the water the water environment is so laden with these nutrients that the biological organisms, the seagrasses, the mangroves, anything else that's uptaking these nutrients can no longer assimilate those nutrients. And that's when you start to see a rapid decline in the biota, which is sort of the filtration system out there. And especially in Julia Tuttle, as most people know, there's been a severe seagrass die-off. And with the inability for any of the plant life to uptake these nutrients, there's sort of this, growing loading of these nutrients that don't have anywhere to go. And so the thought is to start designing some of our systems, our stormwater systems, to have the pre-treatment that will remove these nutrients, which is difficult because in the past, most of the stormwater design systems were to eliminate particulates, but these are not particulates that can be picked up with any of the previous solutions that we've used. And I know the city of Miami Beach and maybe the city of Miami are using these filtration systems that are designed to remove the nutrients prior to the water being discharged out to surface waters. I know Indian Creek, for one, has that's a system that's been in place. But it does take some diligence because there's a lot of maintenance involved. There's a lot of monitoring to make sure that they're, continuing to be effective. So there are some challenges, but I think collectively with all of these ideas, we can start tackling these things in small bits, and that we can't just say, oh, it's this one thing. It's all of these things together. And I think as we move forward, we're gonna rely on the community, not only the governments, but I think JP mentioned it earlier in his opening remarks on trying to bridge the gap between the government and everybody else, really. I think that's where it is, and having this education component for all the design professionals and really just residents in general, that they do play a part in this. This isn't just a government issue. This is an everybody issue. So I think that's an important component of this, is to bring the community into this and let them know what role they can play to sort of help this issue.
Thank you, Lisa. It's kind of a little bit of a follow-up. So, I live in Miami Beach. I have the fortunate that I live on the intercoastal, so I kind of see the water all the time, and I live close to the beach, so the actual ocean. And just regarding the, I guess you called it particulates, Lisa, and maybe Alan, you can answer this one, but things that I see, the bags, the bottles, the where does that stuff actually originate from? Is it local? Does it come from far away? And then maybe just I'll follow, maybe because we're kind of getting a little tight on time. So the follow-up question is like, is that stuff that we see in the water worse than the pollution that we don't see? So it's kind of a two-part question. I don't know, Alan, if you have any insights there.
Okay. If it's in the water, it came from somewhere on the streets, and whether it's the city of Miami or one of the neighboring municipalities upstream on one of the canals or the Miami River, it probably was a plastic bottle or something that somebody threw on the street. And once it gets in the stormwater system, it's going to get flushed out at some point in time. We are trying to put in our downtown area 1,000 inlet grates to prevent that stuff from getting into the system. And it's a matter of trying to get people to either adjust their behavior, which doesn't work necessarily, or putting in protection to prevent that from happening. And I think that for every bottle that you see floating in the Miami River or the waterways, there's probably a dozen or more that goes unnoticed. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. So we are trying to modify the system to take into account human behavior and to try and capture a lot of that to change how much can get passed through and discharged. But that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to change the system the way it was designed originally.
I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts. I just a couple, I'll be brief. I think the marine debris issue is something that people can see. And I think sometimes that's easier to latch on to that issue because you can see it. And so that is sort of a positive and a negative because although the marine debris is an issue, it's not the issue. And I'd say that in terms of changing behavior, like Alan said, you know, remember how Miami-Dade County is set up. We are largely built our economy on tourism. And so you have a ton of people here that don't live here and work here all the time. And so these education campaigns that Betsy was talking about are largely geared towards residents. And I think that part of just the marine debris side of things can be expanded to include people that maybe don't live here. And there's got to be a better way to sort of capture you know, those folks that maybe don't care as much about what happens every day, or doesn't, you know, they don't live on the water and they don't have to see, you know, all the floating debris coming up on the beach or in the bay, or they're, you know, that I think is one thing that maybe we could do better at is trying to capture that side of things. And maybe that's not for necessarily this group to consider, but it's definitely something to think about. But I would say that the sort of silent killer are the nutrients, the things that you can't see in the water column that are most detrimental to the health of Biscayne Bay and our ocean waters and our reefs and things of that nature. I don't know, Betsy, if you want to sort of chime in on your end, what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Lisa's saying. Is, you know, marine debris is what people see, so it's easy to latch onto as the main problem. However, it is the pollutants that you can't see that are impacting the health of our bay, of our coral reefs. In Miami Beach, and I know, you know, around the county, because we're all part of the MPDS co-permittees, a big piece of our efforts also are maintenance. How do we maintain our system once it has been installed underground, both the new infrastructure as well as the old infrastructure? So, you know, it starts on the street. So having a comprehensive street sweeping program. Last year, we removed over 6,000 pounds of street sweeping just, you know, before it could even enter the stormwater system. And a lot of times it's that sediment and debris that captures those nutrients before it goes into the system. And then within our system, what we've done is we've designed a centralized collection. So we have trash racks and pollution control devices that help capture those bottles, that leaf litter before it ever enters the bay. In Miami Beach, we've increased the maintenance. I believe it's the most aggressive in the county, and I believe even maybe the state, where we're cleaning the entire system at minimum once per year. And in addition to that, the areas where we have the centralized water treatment systems, we're cleaning on a weekly, bi-weekly basis to make sure that we're getting that litter and debris, including sediments, including bottles, out of the system before it can enter the bay. So I do think, you know, there's an education piece, but then there's also how do we maintain the system so that we're preventing those pollutants from ever getting into the waterway itself.
Thank you. Before we get into questions of the chat, I just wanted to add myself that part of the debris that I'm personally seeing are now the masks. I know that we're all using that to protect ourselves from COVID, but I see a lot of that in the water. So I think that that plays into, the education portion that you all have been talking about. Let's all be mindful of that. Okay, so I'm going to pick a random question from the chat. One of them is, are either of the cities implementing passive design solutions, not pipes and pumps, to address water quality before it passes into our waterways? Anybody from the panel can answer that one.
Yeah, so we, ahead of the pipes and pumps, we're implementing green infrastructure, native species in swale areas, green parks, bioswales to not only treat the water, but also encourage the percolation of water, which is extremely important for our environment here in the city. We need to encourage the percolation of water to build a freshwater lens below that would sustain the vegetative life in the city, and in turn that has a compounding effect because that vegetative life uptakes nutrients, which is what we ultimately want to treat the water. So we did a citywide study with Jacobs Engineering, and we put together a plan to implement green infrastructure in the front end of designs as opposed to it having been an afterthought. So we're moving forward with that plan, and it's been formally adopted by commission, and it's really the poster child of the passive treatment that we're implementing.
And I'd say the city of Miami is doing the same thing. We are almost completed with revising our stormwater master plan. A big part of that was changing the design standards and how we construct infrastructure. In the past, it was built strictly to convey the water without any thoughts of environmental friendliness. And now we know that we have to not only convey water, but we need to capture it wherever we can, and using greater swales, green infrastructure, so that we're not discharging as much. And when that amount that we do discharge has been filtered or cleansed as much as possible as it's passing through the systems.
Thank you. Jason, you want to pick the next question?
Yeah, here's a good one, guys. And I can kind of open it up to the group, and it ties into one question that we actually couldn't get to a little bit, but what other cities around the country or around the world should we be looking to model in terms of advancing green infrastructure design as standard practice, knowing that our environment is unique? And we had a kind of a follow-up question related. I'm from the Boston area and San Francisco, and we were curious too, how are we compared to them? I remember a day when Boston Harbor, I mean, literally there were like dead fish, like there was nothing. So, and it's like night and day now, at least I think it is when I go home now, it looks beautiful. So maybe there's like a couple questions there, but certainly like what areas should we be looking at as role models for what we want to achieve? Anybody?
I would say there's a lot of cities. Boston is definitely taking a lead. We're all working with alliances and groups that focus on more resilient, greener solutions to problems. C40, Resilient Cities Network, and that's where you bring in Paris, Rotterdam, Houston actually is got some good ideas, but there are plenty of people with great ideas, and through these collaborative methods of meeting with them, you learn what works and what doesn't work, and what we can apply to what's unique in Florida.
And Alan, that's a great point. It's all about what works here, right? I mean, New York, for example, has amazing examples of green infrastructure, Battery Park, the High Line, but that might not be the right solution for us. So, for example, we're doing the underline here, not the High Line, but it just implementing what works here is really the key. And to answer your question directly, Jason, I think you were alluding to also how our water quality compares to other urban coastal cities. And what I'll tell you is, in my experience, the water quality we see here in the city of Miami Beach is 100% aligned with what is common for urban coastal cities. And unfortunately, there are constituents in the water, and we need to do our best to remove those. But in an urban environment, they end up in the water as it's really collateral damage of having this this very dense urban beach that we all enjoy.
So I have a little bit of a different perspective and something a little closer to home. In terms of some work that the county's done in developing our Biscayne Bay report card, we were looking at other communities that have similar issues to us, and I think Nelson's correct. I think we're not that unique in terms of the issues that we have. You know, it's really like the conveyance of the stormwater issues and leaky infrastructure, and I know Boston for sure is one that I think really sort of cleaned up their act. They had a lot of direct sewage discharge and things of that nature that were occurring. And I think we as a community had some of those issues probably in the early 80s that we've since, you know, really sort of cleaned that side of the system up. But Tampa Bay is one that we have looked at in terms of an estuary that, you know, isn't exactly the same as Biscayne Bay, but it's close. They have seagrasses and other types of biological communities that are very similar. They have artificial reefs, and so they're able to sustain the same types of biological components. And so although we looked at Chesapeake Bay as another sort of success story in them in the way that they've tried to address their nutrient pollution, but I think Tampa Bay is closer to us in terms of ecology. And so we are looking at the ways in which they were able to reduce the amount of nitrogen, which was their primary constituent of concern that was coming into their system, and try to use some of the lessons that they learned on how to make those things work. And, you know, they're just on the other side of the state. So, you know, during our Biscayne Bay task force, we had them participate in that and provide us sort of their perspective on how they were able to do things, to give us a few ideas on how we can make that work here in our community with our issues. So that was one that I think is pretty aligned to some of the issues we have here.
Lisa, now that you're talking about other areas in Florida and comparing that to here in Miami, what about how are we doing compared to other major cities like Boston, San Francisco, New York?
I think, you know, the northern states and their cities have very different issues than we do down here. So it's hard to make a comparison, because where ours might be more storm and rain runoff related, they may have some other direct impact issues where the infrastructure was just built the way it was and it hasn't been updated. And I think we have heard from several, I guess I'll call them innovative companies that have done work in some other cities around the United States, as well as in I think there was one from Israel and a couple in Europe that they've used green infrastructure solutions to some of their issues. And some of those will work here, but a lot of them aren't set up for our kind of unique ecology. So they're maybe can be combined with some other solutions that we've been talking about today to, like, holistically try to enhance our bay from a water quality and biological perspective. So I think at this point we're uniquely situated because we have so much buy-in right now from all of our coastal municipalities, from the county. It's a priority of the county right now to work with our partners, even at the state, federal, and local level, to address these issues. And I think that that's the greatest step we have moving forward, is this momentum behind this effort. And it will take all of the folks that are participating in this today, and we welcome the participation on trying to identify our very unique issues, and to not, you know, shy away from lessons learned in other places because maybe they're not as appropriate here, but to think about them maybe in different ways. So I know one of the things that I've heard from from New York City was this oyster reef design that they've had installed to assist them in some erosional, some water quality problems. And although I don't think the oysters themselves would work here, but just thinking about that and applying to how it would work down here, I think has been a benefit.
Well, that's a really good segue to a question I had about, and of course we're, you know, as someone that lives here, I'm so happy to hear that my city and my county have taken this as a priority, and that they're putting things in place where a lot of the pollution's coming from, you know, the corporate environment. But, you know, as a resident, I guess I put the question out to everybody, maybe Elizabeth, you can start, you know, what can we as the people on the ground, as just, you know, someone that lives in a home here in the area, maybe not even on the beach, maybe in Hialeah or in, you know, Plantation or something. What can we do to support these efforts? Because I know both Lisa and Alan alluded to, you know, it's kind of a much larger global issue than just what the cities and jurisdictions do.
It's a huge question, right? There's so much to be done, and I don't think that there's one perfect answer. But you know, I would say, you know, for me, I think it's engaging with the ecosystem. I think, you know, we are so blessed as a community to have Biscayne Bay as our backyard. And, you know, something that has been encouraging during the pandemic is to see so many more people on the water experiencing it through kayaking, stand-up paddleboard, or just even walking along our bay walks. So I think the more people that take the time to engage and come out and see the bay, see the dolphins, see the manatees, you'll see why this is worth protecting and why it's worth the dollars that cities as well as the county needs in order to invest to keep this resource pristine into the future for our children and grandchildren.
Great answer. Thank you, Elizabeth. Alan, your thoughts?
I'd like to just carry on with what Elizabeth was saying. You know, it's great having people who are involved and understanding how important this topic is. It takes regional solutions and it takes money. And the only way that happens is by getting elected officials in government to really focus on it. And that will happen when enough people say this is important. So it's keeping engaged, making sure that your commissioners, your mayor, everybody who has the ability to influence our ability to get the work done, places this as a number one priority. You know, if we all are working together and we prioritize right, we can make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. How about you, Nelson?
I would echo what Alan said, and to to add work for Betsy, I would say, Betsy, you chair the Citizen Sustainability Committee, right?
Yes.
So here in Miami Beach, we have a Citizen Sustainability Committee that's exactly for that purpose, how our citizens can get involved, and either by supporting government or educating and learning what it is that they can do on a personal basis. And Betsy's the chair of that.
And I want to do a shout out. We have a number of our sustainability committee on the call today, so it's great to see friendly faces out there, or I guess friendly names.
Lisa, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, I really want to echo what Betsy said on in terms of this pandemic and what that has been in terms of environment, and I'm sure because everybody's sort of stuck at home, or at least they were for, you know, several months. I think from the county perspective, what we were seeing was a lot of traffic in terms of people looking out their windows, they're looking at the bay, they're looking at the ocean, they're seeing wildlife come back, things that they didn't see before, or maybe because the even before people were out and about, maybe this was more like maybe when people were sort of stuck at home and they'd look out their window and they'd see small toothed sawfish in the bay, which are, you know, endangered, and so they would want to tell us about that, and, you know, couldn't believe that they would see, you know, manatees and any number of wildlife. And I think that the people that are engaged are always engaged. So the people in your citizenship that are up on these issues are always, you know, they're always up on the issues. It's how do you get the people that aren't up on the issues? How do you get the people that maybe don't realize that tossing, you know, their bottle off the boat while they're out there fishing really does matter when you have, you know, 2 million people that maybe are doing that. And so I would say that in terms of getting people to know what they can do, I think it's bringing everyone together to know that even these small things do make a difference, and that collectively, that you might not think that you have a role in this because you don't live in Miami Beach, and so this isn't my issue. This is Miami Beach's issue. It's how to bring the community together to say, you know what, that thing that you threw out of your car on Kendall Drive, yeah, that ends up in the canal, that ends up in Biscayne Bay. So I think the best way is, you know, I think we've shown over this pandemic, we've changed. We've changed as a people. We've changed our behavior. We've changed the way that we've lived our lives. And yeah, we're still, as Katrina mentioned, the mask issue, the glove issue, those are issues that we need to tackle. But they're really just an extension of an existing issue. And so I think what we really need to do is to get the people that aren't engaged in the environmental side to be engaged in the environmental side. That is the big challenge here, because everything that you do, whether you live, you know, 5 miles inland or you live on the water, has an impact. And I think trying to bridge that gap is our biggest challenge. And I think that through our education campaigns, our awarenesses, what Alan said about having our policymakers be engaged in this, these are all really important parts of the collective. And like Betsy mentioned, it's not just one thing, it's all of these things. But I do think that sometimes we forget that the people that are engaged, they're the ones that we don't necessarily have to worry as much about. It's the people that aren't engaged, that don't think they make a difference, or that it's not their issue because they're not a coastal community. How do we get those people to want to participate the same way that Miami Beach and the city of Miami are participating, and all the other coastal communities that are sort of they're at the end of the line. So they're in the receiving end of all the things that happen on the inland portions of our county. So it's a challenge. And I think that because of where we've come in these last 8 months, I think we can do it. I think we just need the will at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. So it looks like somehow we've reached our time limit, but I think that those comments are great ways to conclude the conversation for now. Obviously, we need to have many more conversations about this. I want to give a special thank you to all of the panelists, and Katrina, I don't want to cut you off either if there's some additional things you would like to say as well, but I do want to thank Katrina and for actually introducing me to Nelson, and Nelson for getting, who is actually the president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and for their partnering with us on this event. This is a great example of how one person, Katrina, knew Nelson, and then we came together and were able to put together this incredible panel and this discussion, which of course right now is pollution solution with a question mark. And I look forward to the day when that question mark is a firm set of exclamation points, because that just means that we've solved the problem, and I know we're well on the way. So I do want to again thank you, Lisa, Alan, Elizabeth, and Nelson for all your contributions. Katrina?
Jason, if you don't mind, Carlos is our president. I'm just a director. I advise him. I'm not important. Carlos Tijerino, who's on the line, is our president.
I appreciate all the efforts. Thank you so much, Nelson.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists. We really appreciate this great conversation. And I think that everybody here listening is just part of that educational group, and now we have to spread the word. Only way.
Okay.
Cheryl, any closing remarks?
No, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thanks to all of our panelists. Information was really terrific. Betsy, you know, I worked with you for years on that sustainability committee, and I'm so happy to see that it's still doing such good work for those of us on Miami Beach, because it affects everyone. And thank you, Katrina and Jason, and everybody. Check out our website, miamicad.org, for events that are coming up. Probably the same thing I can say for the APA Gold Coast chapter. Check their website, check the ASCE, because all of our associations are really working hard to provide programming in this crazy time, and getting information out to all of us. So thank you, everybody. And don't forget MCAD on Give Miami Day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.